Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Today, we're going to talk about perceptions and the impact that perceptions can have upon us. And not just any type of perception. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about how we perceive and the perception that we have with with the people that are closely involved with us, our parents, our role models, how we perceive them. That's big. Today on the show, we have a beautiful young lady who was awakening with the perception of the parents in her house. It clearly changed her life. It was emotional when she told me about the story. And it's funny because I always say, walk in somebody else's shoes. I was in her shoes, so to speak, and we shared that moment. Today, I'd like to welcome from Canada, but now in California, Kelly Fidler, and we're going to call this episode Fiddler on the Roof. Welcome to the show, Kelly. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited to share.
Okay. Let's start off with telling the viewers a little bit about who Kelly Fidler is, because definitely you're not one of the daughters from Fiddler on the Roof.
No, definitely not. I am the youngest child, but not of a bunch of daughters, certainly. One sister, one brother.
Okay.
Uh, who am I? Gosh, I'm a mom and a wife and a sister and a daughter and all the things. I live here in Orange County, California with my husband and my daughter. I have
Mhm.
two grown sons who still live in Canada. We moved here about 4 years ago,
Mhm.
just before COVID. So
Right.
zero stars for changing countries in a pandemic. That was
Right.
definitely stressful. But yeah, I grew up in a small town in northern Ontario, Canada. For those of you who know, that's on the east near Toronto. Lived there my whole life.
Mhm.
I've always worked in healthcare, whether directly in hospitals or in industry, in sales and marketing and all those fun things.
Mhm.
And then had the good fortune, or I created the good fortune of being able to come down here to California. And I work for a heart valve company that gets to create awesome products that save people's lives every single day.
Mhm.
And I get to work and live in this beautiful place. And now I know why people who are born and raised in Orange County or Southern California never leave because it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go back a little bit. Small town, Canada, probably totally different, or is there any similarities to your town in versus ours in the United States? What's it like growing up where you were at?
I guess I always used to say living in a small town, the good and the bad of it is that everybody knows you and everyone knows your business.
Right.
So that can be great if you get into a jam, and it can
Mhm.
be terrible if you don't want anyone to know what's going on.
Right.
So I think the difference between where I am now and where the city that I lived in as I grew up in Canada, not a lot of difference. Community culture versus individual culture, Canada versus US, a little bit,
Mhm.
but from a small town, huge difference.
Mhm.
I don't often run into anybody I know here if I'm in the grocery store getting a coffee, whereas in a small town, you know everybody and they know your business. So
How does
I
that
think that's
affect
the biggest difference.
how did that affect you in a small town where everybody could potentially know your business? I mean, I'm pretty sure if there
Yeah.
were mistakes that were made, I'm pretty sure in situations like that, a lot of things are hidden in the closet, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely. I think the thing about small towns is whatever narrative is built about you,
Mhm.
it goes through the whole town, right? So,
Right.
and that could be built off that some stupid thing you did as a teenager. So I think what happens outside of the four walls of your house and what happens inside of the four walls might be very different. And so you put one face on when you're out in town, and you might have a very different face when you're in home. I
What
think
was
that's probably the thing I noticed.
what was it like in your household in general? You're definitely very successful now. We'll get into that later, but to get to where you at, you had to
Mm.
have some foundation or you recreated foundations. What was it like for you there?
I think it's probably closer to the latter. You know, I grew up with parents who were very, very different. Physically different. My dad was 6'7". My mom is 5 feet tall. They could not be more physically different. My dad was the fun Bobby, the gregarious, everybody liked him,
Mhm.
played guitar, sang, all those things. Great public speaker,
Right.
held an audience with a story. My mom was always very quiet, hardworking, but she grew up on a dairy farm and she could get some shit done. Like she definitely was strong little pocket-sized person for sure. So maybe opposites attract. That's how they got together when they were younger. But what it meant was growing up, my dad sort of just did what my dad wanted to do, and my mom was the one who kind of kept everything together. They had 3 kids, year apart each, so she managed the job and the kids and the bills and the groceries and keeping the house clean. And as a mom now, I can really understand how much work that meant. And I'm just like, wow, how did she do all of that? And my dad, he, it probably seems mean. He built a lot of paper, balsa wood gliding airplanes and played guitars and watched TV. So these were very different people. And I think you look at that and you say, okay, do I want to emulate that or do I want to go in the complete opposite direction? They did not
Mhm.
have a lot of money. We never took vacations. All of that was, the work was to kind of keep the house afloat. So as an adult and as a parent, I want to go the other way, not totally spoil my kids, but I want all the opportunities and I want the experiences for them to be what I wished mine were when I was growing up. So I think it can either make you or break you. You either follow in a path and you think that you can't get off the tracks, or you say, hey, I'm going to hit a different track and I'm going to go in a different way. And that's the path that
What
I chose.
what was the perception now that you're older? What was the perception that was perceived in your home versus what was demonstrated into the public's eye? Because you mentioned you wanted to take a different path. So
Yeah.
what was the path that you want to take, and what was the perceptions that people saw versus what you didn't saw to make you say, I'm not going to go this way, I want to go this way,
Yeah.
and why?
Yeah. So I would say the perceptions of my parents were not as a couple as completely different individuals. So my mom is very religious, has been a Jehovah's Witness the entire time that I grew up. I think she became one out of a search as a young mom to have a connection to a community, or at least that's how she's explained it to me. So she was always going to church and doing all of those things 3, 4 days a week. So she was known for that.
Mhm.
My dad, on the other hand, had a drinking problem and was always in town at the Union drinking beers with guys and singing and playing guitar. So he was that fun guy. And because he was physically so tall, he was unforgettable, right? He was this handsome, tall man. And people would be like, oh, that's your dad. And they would almost, oh, it's a shame he was drunk, but brush it off like, oh, he was, just having fun at the bar. Um, but he was known for that gregariousness and and his personality, I guess. So I don't know what the town or what people perceive them as a couple to be. They were always perceived as two individuals from where I was sitting.
How did you perceive it? Because here's a religious side of your mom, and here's your dad. That's the fun, loving. Which one were you close to? Which one did you take more um mentoring out of versus not mentoring out of? Because two different lifestyles, and
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
understand from talking to previous Jehovah Witnesses, that's a pretty tight situation to be in because they pretty much say it's you got rules that they follow, period.
Yeah. So I will say that the person I was closest to and that would be a mentor was my mother, with the strong exception of the religious piece. So my mom would take all 3 of us to all church and out knocking on doors and all of that. Um, and I think mostly because my dad just wanted his days to himself, and so, yeah, Heather, go ahead, take the kids. Um, But I was 12 years old and realized that that was not the religion or the life for me. I wasn't allowed to play sports. I couldn't hang out with kids at school. You had to really stay only within the church community. And that was just not my style. I wanted to play sports. I had lots of friends at school. And fortunately, because my parents were not both in the religion, my dad had always said, if the kids don't want to go, you can't force them to go. So by the time I was 12, I went to my mom and I just said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was the first of the three kids to just stop going. So though I would say she is a mentor for a work ethic and an approach to parenting and an approach to being empathetic to people,
Mhm.
the religious side of my mom was and is like completely opposite to me. I'm grateful that she has that community for things that she's gone through.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of things that I'm like, no, just doesn't track for me. So, but she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. And so she's definitely the one that the way I parent and the way I approach work and strategy and all of those kinds of planning steps. That's my mom.
What about your dad? What was relationship like with Jack? Because you give your mom a lot of high praise. I mean, like
Yeah,
pretty much she seems to be the blueprint right now before you reach your 20s as pretty
yeah.
much the person that you want to be. What about your dad?
Yeah, growing up with him, I found challenging because I didn't really see the same him that everyone else saw, right? It's not like he brought that same happy-go-lucky nature into the house.
Mhm.
He wasn't angry in the house. He was just disconnected. So he was almost a stranger living in our house,
What do you
and it
mean when you
was
say disconnected, Kelly? What do you mean?
he wasn't, he wasn't at our sports events. He didn't come to public speaking things that I did. He wasn't that dad, though he had the time, certainly. He
Mhm.
didn't prioritize those things with kids. He would give us a ride to a few things, but I don't really remember his participation in a lot of things, not coming home and saying, hey, how did you do on your math test? Or maybe even knowing that I had a math test, right? So
Mhm.
that in that way, I would say disconnected because he had his world and he lived his world in our house is kind of the feeling that I had growing up. And it'd be interesting to see if my brother and sister, who are both older than me, but if they feel the same way. But that's definitely how I took his presence. And it wasn't until I got much older where I realized there are things about me
Mhm.
beyond just my physical presence because I'm 6 feet tall and I'm, definitely like to be heard and entering in a room. But there's stuff about the way that I approach, my job and people in general relationships where I realize that's my dad's side. And while I probably as a younger teenager would have resisted that and said, I'm not like my dad. Those things now as an adult, I appreciate having them because that's some of the way that I've become successful is in taking that ability to inspire people and tell stories and do all things like my dad and his family. It's a credit to him that I have that. Maybe it's genetics, but
When did
I'll
you
take it. But
when did you realize that there was what seemed to be or appeared to be a disconnect with you and your dad? And when it happened, did you ever regain it? Like what
yeah,
was that like for you?
yeah, I can remember the day that the disconnect was fractured. I was 16. So I'll go back a little bit. I would say in my early teens, I think I spent a lot of time trying to impress him, trying to do something where he would be vocally to me proud, like, oh my God, that was so incredible. I didn't get that. And I don't complain about that. It was, if I got 95 on a test, my dad would say, oh, what was wrong? You couldn't get 100, right? and
Mhm.
and I catch myself being wired that way with my own children and even with my own team at work. And so I have to sort of work through that. But when I was 16, I had a boyfriend and we were spending time together. And I remember getting in an argument with my dad one night about coming home late the night before. And he had been drinking and he came up to me in the chair that I was at. And again, he's a very big guy and he's just kind of lording over me and telling me. how disrespectful and rude and all this for having come home late. And I remember him saying to me that I was being an asshole, which, that wasn't
Wow.
language in our house, but
Mhm.
that night he had used it. And I remember just standing up in the chair and saying, if you want to look at an asshole, I suggest you grab a mirror. And I moved out, and I moved out of the house at 16. And that really was the start of a lot of different sort of changes that happened in me. But that's the fracture of the relationship with my dad that happened.
When you
Did
say
it, did
different
it,
things, I didn't mean to cut you off. When you say different
yeah,
things,
yeah,
and I'm trying to put the people in the mind of your age,
yeah,
the environment, the fact that this guy is big, but he's still your father. But you're starting
yeah,
to your perception of what a father should be evidently isn't registering to your dad. So you're now
yeah,
taking that chance to actually stand up and say something to him. But what was the ripple effect? Because now you're leaving out of the house. So you mentioned
yeah,
a change. So I'm trying to put the viewers in the mind of a what 16-year-old,
yeah.
15, getting ready to walk out the
16,
house.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What
And
were the
I
ripple
mean,
effects?
so I didn't walk out and I wasn't, homeless. I walked out and ended up moving in with my boyfriend. Um, while I finished up high school, and then we ended up going away to university together, and then ended up marrying, and so
Back
all of
up a
that kind of
minute.
stuff.
So your boyfriend's mother, wait a minute, back up a minute here. So,
Small town,
okay,
Andre.
so two parts to this. Small town. So do the people know what went on in your house that made you move in with your boyfriend? And more importantly, you don't hear too many boyfriends bringing their girlfriend to live with them permanently,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I have 3 kids, and if any of them at 16 had said,
Yeah,
"Hey,"
right.
I'd be like, "The hell you are?" Yeah, I never really thought about it. We had I think we'd been maybe dating a year at that time, so not that by any stretch is that a long-term relationship. It didn't really get called into question. I remember my now ex-husband's father, he was the one who picked me up because, of course, pre-cell phone, so you call the landline. And
Right, right.
he was the one who answered, and I just told him, like, I got a fight with my dad. They knew, of course, that my dad was quite a heavy drinker, because I would share that with them. So he came, no questions asked, and picked me up. And so I think for them it was more of a savior kind of thing. It wasn't like our son's girlfriend is moving in, that's weird. It was more like, hey, Kelly's in a jam, we're going to help her. I never really thought about what did the town think about it. I would hazard a guess they probably thought it was, oh, they're just two lovebirds moving in, and which is weird because, again, I wouldn't definitely do
Right.
that these days as a parent. But I didn't really think about it. It's just kind of maybe more accepted. This was late 80s, early 90s. So you may have introduced me as a young lady. I'm not that young. So this is, maybe at a time that, people were getting married by the time they were 22, 23. So it wasn't super shocking. But yeah, it certainly was, putting myself in a different situation where the choices I wanted to make about where to go to school and on all of that were affected now by the fact that I live with my boyfriend. So
Mhm.
I would say that's kind of where things changed. And then you asked about the ripple effect of doing that. The one ripple that I didn't account for, that I understood later on, was the impact to my brother, who was still living at home, and my mom, because she was sitting there as the person who kept everything afloat and was doing all the things to make sure that we were taken care of emotionally and all of that. And then here I was gone, and she couldn't do anything. So she would send me letters, just not begging me to come back, but just checking in on me, um, and things like that. So I hadn't really thought about that. But of course, you're 16 and you think you
Yeah,
know
but you
everything. And
just said something else. I'm sorry. I'm a parent. If my kid went to go stay with somebody, especially as a father, and you're my daughter, I'm getting you back home.
yeah,
I'm your
true. I
mother.
would.
I'm your mother. I'm getting you back home. I'm not sending you letters. Oh, how you
Yeah,
doing? Because
yeah.
it's not their responsibility to fix the problem. So why do you think the problem was perception again. So what do
Yeah.
you think the perception was in your household? Because you just said it, you wouldn't even allow that with your own kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's true. You know, I'm gonna hazard a guess. Back to religion. That is a religion that believes that the man is the head of the household. Full stop. He could be a raving lunatic loser, but he is the head of the household. And my mom definitely defaulted to that on all decisions. And so my guess is, though she is very capable of pulling that string and saying, "Hey, the hell, this is happening. You're moving home." Because it was related to my dad, maybe she was not, that would be over asserting herself over him. Like, you screwed this up. Our daughter left because of you, and I have to go fix it. I don't think she would do it that way. It's an interesting question. But my mom has always taken a more gentle approach to things. Yeah, I remember my son when he was a toddler and he was tired as hell. I was divorced at this point and he was having a tantrum on the floor and I just left him there and I walked
Mhm.
out of the room and my mom was like, "Kelly, he just needs a hug." You know, she was that kind of
Right,
nurturer. "He just needs a hug. He's probably mad that you're divorced." And I'm like, "The hell he is. He needs a nap. He's tired, mom." Like, she
right,
just
right.
is, she's that nurture type, but not that mama bear. But yeah, would I have gotten in the car and dragged my kid's ass back home to talk it out? You sure bet I would.
So I'm gonna go back a minute before we move forward
Yeah.
with your amazing life. So nobody stepped up to the plate to ask you to come home. You live in a small town. I can just imagine the perception in the whispers that are going around the town. But now your ripple effect is happening because now you have to find somebody to validate. So I guess your validation now went to your boyfriend and his family, I take it.
Yeah, he has a really big family in that town, and so you were basically adopted into a community of people to which I still talk today. Like, it was a great adopted family. I personally didn't have family outside of my own house in that town. We had moved. I don't even actually know how it is we landed in that town, but we were there. So I was kind of adopted into this big family, and so that was actually a positive to have that group of people being there to support and know, and if you got into a jam, there's a bunch of them there. Um, but certainly, yeah, that was, it just put my path in a bit of a different direction.
What were people saying? Like, you're there, and did you even communicate? Did it fracture the relationship between you and your mom, your dad, and your siblings? Because
Mm,
you're in a whole different environment now.
yeah. Um, I would say it didn't fracture the relationship, but it definitely ceased communication on a lot of fronts because we didn't have the same ways of, you didn't have Facebook and Instagram to stay caught up and can't WhatsApp them and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So there was just a period of very little communication. Um, my brother graduated; he was a year older than me, so he went away to school, and it's not like I had occasions to go to my house. And so I just didn't talk to them for a bit, and then fast forward, I think a year and a half, I was going away to school. So then you get into the normal phase of you're away at school and you don't see your parents as often. Um, I came back to my relationship with my siblings and my mom um, after I finished school, and my parents by that point had become divorced. So then my father had moved away, and that was the start of a long time of him having very little communication with us, mostly because my mom is the one who instigated. If they were calling me every week, she was the one dialing the phone and handing it to my dad. It's not like he would be, "Hey, we should probably call our kids this weekend," and picking up the phone. So there was a long period of not communicating. But as far as the perception in town, it just became normal. Like, yeah, Kelly lives there. I don't remember ever feeling weird about it or having to apologize or offer an explanation to people.
So you wind up going on to school. You move on with your life.
Mhm.
Your father eventually passes.
Mhm.
Were there ever And you said something else too that was pretty profound. Your mom did all of the legwork to stay in communication with you. Your father eventually
Mhm.
passed. I'm sorry that happened. You shared with me that. Were there were there still moments that you regretted? Were there any regrets with your father prior to him passing? And when you did find out that he passed, how did you wind up dealing with it?
Yeah, I think the regrets that I had weren't my own. They were more wishes for what I wanted him to be because my memory of his father was that he was a magnificent man. My grandfather is the bar that I set for all men. So it's not like he grew up and that was his, taking on that trauma through his life.
Mhm.
When so those regrets were, gosh, I wish that he had said this at my wedding. I wish he had done this when I graduated, those kinds of things. Um,
Let's go
just
back a
prior
minute,
to,
Kelly. Go
yeah,
back a minute.
yeah,
You open up this
yeah.
box. You open up the box. I'm listening. So, and this is a good question. You're a
Yeah.
girl, daddy's girl. You know what I mean? What were three things that you really wished?
I I think every girl wishes that their dad just I look at my husband and my daughter right now, and you realize that that's the first relationship that she's going to anchor her beliefs in her own relationships with men, whether that's her husband or people she works with or whatever, and somebody that she looks up to. I don't recall having that looking up to him in like not in success and in things like that. I certainly looked up to some of his skills that he had.
Mhm.
Um, and that what I learned early is that I couldn't count on him, which is shitty, right? Like you want to be able to in a jam pick up a phone, you got a flat tire, you want to be able to call your dad, right? So he wasn't that guy, which is one other thing I would wish. So I'd wish he would tell me I'm beautiful and tell me I'm super smart. All the things that you see dads do to build that confidence, to be there when I need him. And then I think to just tell me he's proud or tell me, you're doing a great job or here's what I think you could do better. Get some advice from him. And he wasn't those things. My mom was.
Mhm.
So I think those are the things that I regret, but I don't hold it against him. It
Mhm.
is what it is, and we can't change it. When just prior to him passing, actually, it had been a really long time since I'd seen him, and he didn't live super, super far away. And he was retired. So, the road goes in both directions. You can come and see your grandkids, you can come and see me, but he didn't. I tricked him into a meeting one day. I happened, I was divorced and we used to share custody of our son. Every 2 weeks we would do a pick up and drop off. And this particular time I was dropping him off back at the place where I grew up, where my in-laws. So I was going kind of close by where my dad lived. So I called him that day and I was en route up there and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He wasn't doing anything. He was just having a sandwich. He was sitting at home. And I said, "Oh, are you busy in about an hour?" He said, "No." I said, "Great. Get in your car, drive to Tim Hortons." There's your little nod to Canada. Drive to Tim Hortons. I'll meet you there. So he couldn't really say no because he'd already admitted he was, not doing
Yeah.
anything. And I knew the weather was fine. So, anyways, we met at a Tim Hortons, and my husband and I had just gotten married. So I was showing him the boys had graduated elementary school, all the pictures of grad, all the pictures of my wedding. I just wanted to get him up to speed on like the last 4
Right.
years. So we sat in that coffee shop for like 3 hours and we kind of caught up on things. And it was lovely. When I kissed my dad goodbye, and this is going to sound weird for some people, but if you work in the hospital, it won't sound weird. When I kissed my dad goodbye, he smelled like dead. And if you've ever worked in a place where people are really sick, there's just a smell that it smells like death, and I don't know how to explain it. So when I hugged him goodbye, I noted it, and I told my sister, and I told my husband, and they both looked at me like I was weird. That was the weekend before Good Friday, before Easter, and 3 weeks later, he died of a heart attack. His
Wow.
third wife, who he was married to at the time, I told her this. and he had been sick, but not super sick, like a weird throat thing or whatever,
Mhm.
nondescript that doctors were looking into. And I told her that when I met him that day, he smelled like death. And she knew exactly what I was talking about because she is a nurse. And she said, "Oh my God, I never noticed it. But I was with him every day. But you're right, he would have." So it was just weird. But I manufactured this opportunity to see my dad and catch him up. And it was very timely that I had that, meeting with him. And I don't know why I chose that trip. I did it every second week, but for whatever reason, that time I did. And that was a bit of closure ish.
So when your dad did pass and you had the perceptions, everybody had their perceptions of your dad. You got a little bit of closure, but then you share with me, and I hope you don't mind me sharing it with the viewers.
Hmm.
You had an awakening because you had to speak at his funeral, but then you still
Yeah.
had a perception of your dad, and this
Yeah.
perceptions wasn't validated to the fullest, but somebody else entered your life just out of praise and share with you even more information that was even more beautiful about your dad. Share that with me.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was on a work trip when he had a heart attack, and so I, got the 4 a.m. phone call from my husband, and I called my dad's wife to sort of get the download on what had happened. Did she need help? Did I need to stop my trip and go back home? And she had shared with me, she said, "Kelly, I know that your relationship with your dad was really difficult, but I want to share with you who he was to me." And so she started to describe a person I didn't recognize, how kind and thoughtful and helpful and lovely he was. And so we had a conversation. I got off the phone and I was pissed at first. I was 38, 39. I was a grown woman, but I was mad that he had chosen to have this beautiful life with this person who wasn't his family that he had, raised and created. And I was pissed off at first. So I'm in the process of, writing what it is I want to speak about. And I was thinking about that and how unfair it was that he would choose to give that to that person and not give it to his own kids and growing up. And then I sort of stepped out of myself for a minute and thought,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to put myself in my dad's shoes.
Okay.
Because now I can't go call him out. I can't go back and say, hey, unfair.
Did you
So
want
I
to
thought,
do that
okay,
though?
oh, hell yes. I would have loved to have just like listed out all these things you did that were shitty. I need you to apologize and remember you did them. But I was putting myself in his shoes and I thought, well, wait a sec. What if, let's just argue that maybe he had a realization that he didn't do a great job in the first marriage or the second marriage, quite frankly, that he didn't show up in his best way and he didn't get to do the things that made him happy as much for whatever reasons those were, and that he was doing that now. Like, what if he did all of that looking back for himself and realized he could be a different person? He was living that best life for himself. That probably felt really good, right? I looked at it and I said, wow, okay, he died of a heart attack. That is super shitty. He was 64. He had a lot of time to go. Um, but he was living in a relationship that was loving with a person he loved serving and doing all this stuff. And that probably felt really good. So maybe had he lived another 20 years, he would have come to the place where he calls his kids and says, I wasn't the person I should have been, I could have been, I know I am. Who knows? So when I was writing what I would say at his funeral, that was the basis of my story. I can't be mad about all the things he was because he's not here anymore to apologize. But where he got when he died was probably really good for him. And that's got to be good enough for me, right? So
Right.
it's like, okay, if for somebody he was really in the town and behind the doors of a house, that great person, then that's great. It happens at work too. You can have an employee who, for whatever reason in the job they're in with you, they're just not jiving. Like they just aren't getting there. And I had an employee like that, and he was so awesome, but I needed him to be more sizzle. And he said, Kelly, I can't be sizzle. It's not who I am. I'm the steak. You're the sizzle. And we were
Right.
working out that. But it wasn't that he couldn't do his job, it was that he was suited better for another job. And once he went into that other job, I watch him now like do amazing things and text him like, "Oh my god, it's so great to see you doing these things that you're great at." So maybe that was the same scenario. My dad, in whatever environment we were, wasn't letting him be his best version, and so he died being that best version. And I was like, "Okay, that's cool."
That's a that's a
So
much
that
that's a much beautiful perception than what the people and yourself probably had in the beginning. What did you
yeah.
what before we wrap up, what do you take away from your experience on with your mom, with your dad, with going um to a whole new family? What did you gather from all this?
I don't think I gathered it in the moment. I certainly gathered it later on in life, but you can wallow in the situation you are in, and this is not to be disrespectful. There are some situations that people cannot climb out of, but in the
Mhm,
ones that you can, take the good stuff from where you came from,
mhm,
and take the qualities from it that instilled in you the way you operate your life as an adult, but don't hold on to the baggage, right? Look at it very objectively and say, okay, this was this, but the good stuff was here, and this was that, but this was what I took from it, and take it into your next job or your next relationship or whatever that is. But don't
mhm.
just woe is me. I can't everybody could sit in the woe is me, but you'd never get out of the chair, right? So just take the things that are going to serve you and then put the rest of it in the rearview mirror.
And you definitely done that. Before we wrap up, you done something pretty amazing. You taken all of this, put it on the back burner, and you proceeded to further your education. Give us a little bit about your achievement with that. Congratulations on that, but I'd rather for you to share
Thank
what
you.
you've accomplished.
Oh, thank you. So I did a little thing in 2021. I decided, because I wasn't traveling, because COVID was still restricting international travel, I should probably do my MBA. I'll back up to say that I went to school for medical technology, which at the time was not an undergrad program. It was not an easy program, but it wasn't a bachelor's degree program. So as my career has gotten, promotion over the years, it's become a conversation at many instances with an HR partner who says, "Hey, you don't have an undergrad degree." And usually my success or my CV has gotten me where I needed to go. When I moved here to the US, it was a real struggle to do all the paperwork to bring a Canadian into this country to do a job that required a degree when I didn't have one. But we did all the things based on the experiences that I had to be able to get me here. But it was going to be as far as I could go without a degree.
Mhm,
So I knew that I needed to do something. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to do my MBA because I have lots of years of experience. To get into a program without a bachelor's degree is a feat in and of itself. So I remember getting accepted into the program that I did in Rochester, and that felt like a win. Just even being accepted, they accept one person a year without an undergrad degree into their MBA programs, and it was me. So I was proud of myself for what it took for me to get into that, and that included essays and interviews and the whole jam. But once I got into it, that whole, remember I said my dad would say, "Oh, what's wrong? You couldn't get 100." There's that part of me that
right.
I expect that of myself. So could I have just done it and gotten B's and whatever and got the letters after my name? Sure, I could have done that. Or I could have just crushed it, been at the top of the class, and been the valedictorian at my graduation. So I chose that path, not the easiest path. So yeah, I graduated in May of 2022, which was way more than just the three letters in my degree for me. And I got to stand in front of 5,000 people and give a commencement address about what it meant to graduate. And one of the lines in my speech was about the degree is for you, but the knowledge is for everyone. And I think that that's true about a lot of things, whether it's about your background or your education or your work experience. um, I think we have a lot of things that we've learned, and it's really important that we share it with the people who want to learn. I do mentoring at work. I do interviewing for leadership development programs that we run, and MBA students who'd like to come to our company, because I think people should know the things that you've done and how to get around some things. But yeah, I was pretty proud getting to speak, and speaking in front of people is probably the thing that I in my next life I'll be a stand-up comedian or something like that, where everybody gets to pay attention to me. But I remember giving the address, and my husband, who I've been with for 22 years but doesn't really see me at work, he sees me at
Right.
home, when I finished, him saying, "Wow, you're really good at that." And inside my head, I was thinking, "Well, duh, I know, I know I am." But it was great to watch them experience me, which, like, the me that I know I am. So that's probably what I get out of doing this kind of thing the most, is to watch my impact on people,
Uh,
for it to be a positive experience, that they walk out going, wow, that was really great, or I took something really important to me out of that experience with her. That's the brand that I want to put forward.
Good. Leave the viewers with something that only Kelly can leave them with.
Oh my god.
I got you on the spot
um
now.
you do have me on the spot. I would say you're going to hear no a lot of times in your life, but no is not always no. Sometimes no is just a yes, but, or sometimes no is not right now. But you should, if it's something you really, really want, you should push, find a different route to get what it is that you want. Don't turn around at every no, or you'll be doing a lot of circles for sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode. Thank you, Kelly, for coming on the show of the
Thank you.
Andre the Beast Creighton Show.